Well, good afternoon. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you also very much to the uia for inviting me to be here today, to speak to you in this very active city of Durban. Well, I've already learned a lot by seeing the expos and listening to lectures, and also yesterday with a wonderful night at the last cool runnings. This afternoon I would like to speak about the necessity of deep changes in our way of thinking and building architecture. All the projects presented are built by my ateliers in Paris and Rennes in France. And I choose to present only projects built on the French metropolitan territory. Is it working, the French? C'est bon pour la traduction en français? Oui, c'est bon. Okay, I go on in English. Well, as architects, I think that our practice began with words before taking form. Words precede boards, stone, and construction. And I think that when we are architects, we speak about architecture always, every day, and sometimes about nothing else. We speak about these 2 or 3 things we know about it. First of all, about its benevolence. Architecture provides a service, installed life as soon as the request for it is manifest. Secondly, it's empathy. It speaks of solitude of the individuals and his and her desire for community. It manages to transform each individual insufficiency into a relationship. And then its alchemical capacity. Architecture scope always a global perspective on the world, of it abstract and material data, combining them to create human situation. Last and above all, its wonderful complicity with life. A project of collective awareness, architecture is, at least in my eyes, the installation of life through matter settled with benevolence. Of course, architecture does not know the key of the meaning of life. That, and I still don't know by what heart, architecture is an accomplice of life. It holds the secret of installation. To install is not to understand, but more to invest a place with a passing meaning. And when I say passing meaning, of course, I say life. This eternal architecture, is going through a singular period at this beginning of the 21st century. We are experiencing a complete upheaval of human condition. These relations we have had with nature for millennia are changing, and human establishments are evolving in their wake. Up until 2007, I began all my lectures with a reminder of the planetary condition that demand eco-responsible responses. I thought then that people consciousness has been enlightened, that we knew and felt that we were living, that what have been described by the German philosopher Hans Jonas in this seminal book, The Imperative of Responsibility. I quote him. Suddenly, what is simply a given, what is taken for granted, what is never thought about an aim of an action, about the aim of an action, that there are people, that there is life, that there is a world made for this, is placed under the stormy light of the threat of human action. I also thought at that time that what was stated by another German philosopher called Peter Sloterdijk has been definitively accepted. I quote him. While the different sectors of culture are working at enlightening a new instability, saluting chaos, and celebrating fickleness, I'm sure you all remember that a very famous architect at that time were trying to illustrate the chaos theory. So, Sloterdijk add, for a few years now, we have seen a new type of discussion. Stemming from ecologist circles, it's been picked up by the economists and it is based on sustainability. Gradually, it becomes clear that today's way of life and the long term are two mutually exclusive things. I think that we have to think about this sentence one more time. Gradually, it becomes clear that today's way of life and the long term are two mutually exclusive things. No doubt, yes, we understand. 21 years after Sloterdijk's words, we are aware of this. We know very well, because we are experiencing it now, that our children won't live the lives of our parents. Not at all. We know that. We know this because it was announced so aptly in 1968 by the Club of Rome. I'm a member of the European chapter of the Club of Rome. And it was announced by the Meadows report called The Limits to Growth. It is in 1972. In this report, it was said, and maybe for the first time, that there cannot be infinite growth on Earth that has known limits. We are sure of this, but what's actually being done about it? I think the exact opposite of what is needed. The need for a clean break, the need for innovation is widely absent, although it is so necessary in order to overcome the current situation, to get out of today's prison. Worse still, we are seeing a sort of retreat. While in the early years of the 21st century, the desire to act was shared by our public contracting authorities, today the economic crisis is a good excuse for dropping eco-responsible consideration. Of course, if there are savings to make. We have heard people saying, it is not with this project that I will save the planet. But if we say this about every project, where are we headed? Widespread greenwashing is the sad, unexpected, perverse effect of the general public awareness, mixed with a lack of courage to act and a touch of fake guilt. Dominique Voynet, the former French Ministry of the Environment, one of the first, for whom I worked on a neighborhood agricultural project in the Murapèche in Montreuil, in the Murapèche district, explained very aptly why she decided not to renew her candidacy as mayor of Montreuil by saying what is here in front of you: there is a desire for change, but there is no cultural majority to carry it. I think it is true in Montreuil, but elsewhere also. At the same time, it is an understatement in view of how the aftermath of the banking and financial crisis of autumn 2008 offers a good pretext not to change the disastrous habits that have pushed the planet to its limits. The words of the Club of Rome, of Hans Jonas, of Sloterdijk, of Voynet, speaks to us. I think they don't have to convince us, but they ring true to me, because I have experienced what they're talking about. I'm the son of an oysterman. In the 1960s, I saw the first illness hit the oysters as the result of globalization and pollution. They show the limit of the faith in the glorious 30s, an economic boom in Occident, and the unlimited development of which my family took advantage. The anthropogenic cause of global climate change has been confirmed and is due to greenhouse gas emission caused by human activity. Since 1860, the first year of temperature record, the 13 hottest years have been the 13 we have just lived through, from 2000 to 2013. The 14 was 1998. Because of this global warming, one day, the surface water at the depth of 5 meters of the Sea of China reached 25 degrees Celsius, triggering a super typhoon devastating the Philippines. And the United Nations Office for the Refugees had to add another sad line to its long list. Of course, we can hear the cynical denials of those who are proud of standing their ground in their own name or in the name of the major polluting companies. It is, of course, possible to act out of benevolence towards the earth and out of humanity rather than out of fear of disaster. One can act in this way rather than the exploitation of the planet, which always ends up being the exploitation of humanity by humanity. It is peace that is at stake there. For a loving relationship between man and matter, which is, to my eyes, one of the principal conditions for perpetual peace, as Immanuel Kant understood it. 50 years ago, a French poet named René Char wrote a poem that he entitled La Terre, Earth. I quote him. What is quite spontaneous in man concerning the earth is an immediate familiarity, sympathy, veneration even, almost filial, because it is the matter by excellence. I said this for the French pavilion also. And he added, what could be more worthy of the mind than veneration of matter? As for the veneration of the mind by the mind, have this been seen? All too often. Humanity is so inclined to venerate its own spirit, deliberately forgot its own physical links. Its links of flesh and family that tie it to the earth. It is thought to possess the earth by forgetting that it belongs to it. But here the earth has laid down its limits and thus raised awareness of our own limits. The fragility of the earth is our own fragility. Architecture is at the heart of the human establishment. Protection of the individual and spatial structure of societies at the same time. For us all, it is a question of managing what we have left of nature and humanity, to manage it for the future generations, while accomplishing our project of modernity. We now have to design this project, facing a responsibility that can no longer choose between humanity and nature. We are an integral part of the earth. Acknowledged at last, interdependency will spare nothing and no one. The purpose of our profession is to combine a bit of humanity with a bit of matter that takes form. We participate in a phenomenon that gives meaning to our act. We respond to the demand for architecture that express human societies. Nobody, no society has ever requested unhappiness from me, but always good usage, solidity, well-being, and beauty. Through matter, we transform their wish into reality. We materialize the condition for welcoming humankind on the earth. We install in the depth of place the human wish to live together, even with nature. Architecture remains the condition of repose, which is the foundation of life. Architecture is an installation of the everyday life by a matter settled with benevolence. In this reproduction of this initial act to dispose matter for living, architecture becomes an activity of conscience, of conscience. Architecture is there for life to take place. Architecture install life, find the matter for it in the place. When I say matter, of course, stone, earth, wood, water, but also wind, heat, words, and bodies. Installation is what counts most of all. It is the arrival of existence. Life being at stake, installation is not only spatial, it is also temporal. It is a question of humanity, of joy and sadness, of shelter, and of the organization of relations into a significant structure. The mean of installation is matter. It is a question of carrying out, of achieving, of becoming real, the creation of presence. The project exists through the placing, the positioning of matter. Benevolence gives meaning. Benevolence is an aesthetic as well as an ethical sense, as practical as it is plastic. There lies the difference between building and architecture, in the loving attention that governs the act of conceiving for others. When speaking of architecture, love is never far away. Regarding contemporary rereading of Spinoza's Ethics, the Italian philosopher Toni Negri wrote, what if philosophers didn't like the word love? And what if postmodernism is according to an idea of wilted desire? We who have relearned the ethics, we, the Spinozists, we dare talk about love without false modesty as the strongest passion, the passion that creates common existence. Is it what scares architects? Investing in common existence. I'm absolutely convinced right now that architecture requires of whoever dedicates themselves to it not to speak of it from a position of authority, not to have a fixed agenda, but rather to adapt it to the common lot. I sense that this benevolence, this love, this tenderness for people, for the thing and for the earth that are necessary for architecture, comes from the idea of common good. And this idea of common good is omnipresent in all the theoretical texts on architecture since Vitruvius. Not long ago, concerning rural modernity, and in order to criticize the laziness of current criticism and contemporary town planning theory, which sees the urban and the metropolitan everywhere, I found a quote of the Enlightenment philosopher, Denis Diderot. He wrote to Friedrich Grimm, "It is said that architecture is a limited art, and so it is in the mind of architects. But in itself, I know of none other as capacious. If within a project you take into account time, place, people, destination, you will see an infinite variety of spaces, of voids, of forms, of ornaments, and of everything that belongs to architecture." It may seem strange to go back to the 18th century to find an argument serving to lay the foundation of a narrative on the 21st century. But yet, at the time I was reading Diderot, I found exactly related thinkings in the History and Truth by Paul Ricoeur, or in Praise of Difference by the French geneticist Albert Jacquard, in Achievable Utopias by Jana Friedman, or Genesis by the French philosopher Michel Serres, and of course, in Towards a Critical Regionalism by the Anglo-American historian and critic Kenneth Frampton. After my studies, at the end of a period of travel, I began to understand why the theory inherited by the modern has failed into a murderous internationalism. They thought that universality has been, for them, universality has been confused with unity. What applied to an individual was applicable to everyone. Quite a lot of barbarism emerged from this. That with the Greek philosopher Heraclitus, with Ricoeur, Jacquard, Friedman, Serres, Frampton, and the Swedish architect and theoretician Christian Norbert Schultz, another vision exists. As far as humanity is concerned, only idiosyncrasy can lead to the universal. Idiosyncrasy renders specificity and differences, shared values, common values rich with nature, climates, geography, etc., etc. The differences are the foundation of what is shared, of what is in common. The more you are part of a culture, the more you access to the universal. Of course, this is not one of my projects. It's a sort of grandpa, right? On my return in France, I started my practice. I started to practice the exploration of each culture that unfolds in each place. Since then, I have always enjoyed being a stranger, being a foreigner, the one who knows who doesn't know. A foreigner, someone who dares specificity, differences, culture, in the places where he is invited to work. In order to do this, the architects can profess expressiveness according to the law, character according to the Enlightenment architect Etienne Boulet, genius loci for Norbert Schultz, the culture-nature relation for Kenneth Frampton in the critical regionalism, or, as far as I am concerned, by the central role of culture in sustainable development. Today, culture is no longer the context of our actions. It is the very condition of its accomplishment. The initial oversight of culture as a significant aspect of sustainable development comes as a surprise. And yet, the Brundtland report specified that two concepts are inherent in this notion: the concept of need, and more specifically of the essential need of the most destitute, who would be given the highest priority, and the idea of limitation, that the state of our techniques and our social organization imposes on the capacity of the environment to respond to the current and future needs. The notion of need, the state of technique, and the state of social organization depend on the history of peoples, of culture, the coherent historical figures, according to the French philosopher Paul Ricoeur, and their daily expression. Even if we are seeing global awareness of the planet-wide situation, the means of action are contextualized and depend on cultures, are in the strategy of the available spread of material for people. The situation calls for seeking of, in every place of work, the particularity of meeting of a society and its context. It is not a question of exploring retreat, isolation, communitarism, but rather indeed to connect with what is actually universal on Earth, I said, specificity, idiosyncrasy, differences. In architecture and in urban development, standing up for professing culture allow, among other things, the rejection of the hegemony of technical response to the environmental crisis. It is not the rejection of technique, but the guarantee of the social aspect of projects and the protection of the equitable part of the economy. Actors of the human establishment know very well this, I think. A good idea only carry out if it is understood, adopted, and appropriated by those who will experience it, who will live it. What is appropriated for people and by people, for a society by a society. Architects have to place all the power of architecture at humanity's side in the common world of humanity. Excuse me, it was not exactly on time. What is appropriated for people and by people, for a society and by a society. The need to launch a humanistic project for the multitude further engages architecture in its organizational function, in fact, in its fundamental political vision. Over many years of citizen mediation in various contexts, at all levels of rural and urban development, truth, contrary to common belief, have been revealed, in contrast to confused public opinion and accepted presupposition. Thus, the so-called gap between popular culture and the so-called learned architecture culture does not exist. Architecture does not create it. It is fantasized by those it serves, whatever their affiliation with one side or the other, by those who need to protect their fears and to protect their laziness. Certainly, there is an ignorance, misunderstanding, that although reciprocal, it is not insurmountable. Popular culture and the so-called learned culture of architects, we could say also ignorant of popular culture, reveal two aspects of a unanimous story, wrongly divided, as, for instance, tradition and modernity, vernacular and metropolitan, or South African farmhouse and Villa Savoy. Every year in Western Europe, only the equivalent of 1% of existing building is being built, only 1%. To achieve international and national targets for reducing greenhouse gas emission by 4 by 2050, what is called factor 4, not fear factor. In our field of town planning and architecture, the main lever is the renovation of the existing building. But in France, I don't know exactly here, but in France, the contemporary conditions for the renovation is not given. It's not there. So how to get to factor 4? I think that we can only do so by engaging civil society, able to evolve faster than institutional structures. In sustainable development and in sustainable design of human establishment, we seek less who has the authority than who holds authority, what holds authority. In the deep strata of pluriel et manger projects, 15 years in a very small village, show how obvious the presence of the other is there, and in order to converse with the other, the primal importance of speech. This truth confirmed over and over in the course of discussion with elected representatives, state services, citizens, individuals or little groups, public meetings, local cafe, in the street, and with the technical services, office workers, neighborhood, shopkeepers, etc., etc. In the village of Pleurin-les-Morlaix, we always try to reach an agreement, and we always reach this agreement. The latest decision in Pleurin-les-Morlaix was the result of a powerful combination of spontaneous words and lines drawn on the ground with the tip of the show. It is the right place, it is there. Today, in the metropolis, in the multitudinous metropolis, this story is being rewritten. Actors are having change their role, and not without some anguish. The person elected by universal suffrage in the elective democracy struggled to accept the future value of participatory democracy. The architect struggles to leave his romantic claim for the status of an artist. This abandon is painful. The engineer has a hard time accepting that scientific fact should be submitted to cultural understanding. Everybody is reluctant to leave behind his or her former powers. But in this troubled world, this attitude isolates them. As for the inhabitants, they too struggle to consider a change in their habits and in their lifestyles. Yet, thanks to all these people and to their joint effort, the sense of authority can change, as I mentioned. The field of experience shows that authority gained through sharing, a real exchange, says the American philosopher Hannah Arendt, exclude not only the stress, but also the persuasion. When a project is discussed with inhabitants, owners, and elected officials, when speaking in the extended contractors' team to work, when the reasons for this decision are shared, when these actions are reconsidered, when the arguments of the project being built in this toing and froing between each and all, then this is the project that holds authority. It represents in everyone's eyes an expression of agreement, their agreement. And I will conclude with this. Regarding the meaning of nature in architectural work, and because it is no longer a question of discussing architecture with oneself, with others, or with the great others, but also with the earth, the path is being opened. I wrote this more than 10 years ago. Maybe we should learn to speak earth, that language that does not know how to separate elements from another one, any more than it does mankind from the elements. And if I had to start with few words, I would willingly learn presence, the in person, the in common, and the living. Right now, here, 12 years after writing this, I wonder if I cannot say also, maybe we should learn to speak architecture, that language that does not know how to separate element from another one, any more than it does mankind from the elements. And if I have to start with few words, I would willingly learn presence, the in person, the in common, and the living. Architecture and the earth, one and the same, in my eyes, of course, without any doubt. Thank you very much.